few slides to quickly run you through. There we go. I'll start off with who Ubersecure is. You've probably not heard of us before. You've got information from us on the table. You heard Stefan talk about the LEI ecosystem. We're a digital identity provider. We've been working in digital identity for 20 years or so, grown up in the Nordics, in Finland. I'm speaking rather quickly because I realise that we are between you and lunch. And we're running late into that, so I'm trying to get through this as fast as possible for you. So, a digital identity provider. We've worked with individual and organisation identity since we started. So, we're saying this is the dawn of organisational identity, but actually it's kind of like a finished dawn. It's kind of going on for a long time. We've been doing this for kind of 20 years now. There's a value in that organisation identity. There's a value in that individual identity, but the values you've already heard today is from the combination of those two together. So for us, what drives us forward is that combination. It's taking a strongly authenticated individual identity, a highly assured organisation identity, combining those together and showing who you are, who you represent, and the rights that you have when you represent them. So this is the delegated authority that you've heard about from the previous panel and how that delegation comes in. For that to be a future of digital identity, it has to have a value. There has to be a reason that you'd want to do that. And I want to look at both, very briefly, a negative cost of not doing that and a positive value of doing that. So you heard from Rebecca previously about the recent Twitter issue and Pentagon's on fire. Higher. Oh yeah, move it up. Here we go. Try that. So you heard from Becker about the Twitter post, even though it was a Twitter Blue verified about the Pentagon on fire. There's a much bigger example of that. When Elon Musk bought Twitter back in November, Twitter Blue was abolished. There were a number of fake accounts created. One of them was for Eli Lilly. There was a post that insulin is now free. The result of that post was a market cap drop of $15 billion for Eli Lilly when that post came out. That was the financial impact of that post being made. Of course, it recovered. If you're a day trader and you've lost 4.5% of your investment because of that post, well, that's annoying, but it's 4.5%. If you're a bad actor looking to leverage that capability, if you're taking a CFD across that time and you know you can generate that kind of market cap movement on an organization, that's a phenomenal return for a bad actor to do that. So the risk of not having the right assurance on organizational identity is very real and easily demonstrated. But more importantly, what's the value positively of having an organization identity and having the ability to delegate organization identity? I said we've been doing this for a while. This is a case study of one of our deployments in Finland. It was deployed to the Finnish government. There may be some people in the room familiar with the deployment. There may not. The Finnish government is very transparent. Every so often, every year, they release statistics around what they do. It varies each year what they look at. In 2018, they released statistics on this platform. So the platform is a delegation of authority platform. It's tied into the business registry. It's tied into the national ID. So it's got a strongly authenticated individual and a highly assured organization identity embedded within that system. It's got, at the time they released these stats, about 450,000 individuals on there, about 400,000 organization identities in there. One of the use cases for that was a tax office, so automatic submission of tax returns. When you create a company in Finland, I'm going to go very quickly now, we're going to build a delegation tree. When you create a company, you go to the company's house, you go to the business registry and register for the company. You get an email from that company telling you that you need to register for taxes. You follow the link, you go onto the Vero website, you register for taxes, you use your strong identity to do that. But I'm the CEO. I'm not going to submit all that information. I've got a CFO. So I will delegate that to the CFO, invite them to the platform. The CFO gets the invitation, they accept the rights and responsibilities and the delegated capability to do that, but they're not going to do it. They've got a team, maybe one for corporate tax, one for payroll, one for sales tax, so they delegate it across the team. The team get the same invitations. We're building this tree structure. But the payroll may be an outsourced company. So that outsourced company is now delegated to by the payroll manager. That corporation, that legal entity, receives the delegation. The administrator picks it up and then delegates it onwards inside that organization to the partner manager, who's going to deal with that for that organization. We've built a tree structure of delegated authority for the submission of tax informations. That is what actually happens right now in Finland. That's been working since 2008. That's how it works. The result of that, measured by this study, by the government in public data, is a 99% reduction in the cost of processing tax transactions. If you want a call to action for why you should start combining organization and individual identity, achieving a 99% saving in anything that you do is probably going to go down well with your board. All right, that's probably a great thing to do. This is government data, it's not our data. Where does that saving come from? Because everything is online, because everything is delegated digitally, there is no need for all of the support staff. When I spoke about that example, I only mentioned the tax office once when that original email came out. They had no further interaction. The delegation was done by the people who know the information. They have much less need for support staff, much less need for physical points of presence. That's where the saving came from. Combining all that together and moving to an online digital capability, that is the value of taking a strongly authenticated individual, a highly assured organization identity, combining them and allowing that representation, that delegated authority. That's what we can achieve through doing this. What's the challenge with this? The challenge with this is that it's embedded within a closed ecosystem. This only works in Finland. They've got Great Bank ID, National ID, PRH is online. All of that can be accessed within that system. It sits on our platform. It's a closed ecosystem. We can't run that here. We can't run that in the US. We can't run that anywhere else. To get this value, we need to transition from lots of different closed ecosystems to a larger open ecosystem. And that's what you're hearing about VLEI and verifiable credentials that allow you to do by having a standardized protocol that allows globally that capability, that possibility to be accessed. What I will do very shortly is hand over to Randy to talk through how that works, very much telecom focused, but how that works from a verified credential point of view, and walking through the life cycle and how that moves forwards. Before I do, very briefly, we are an LEI provider in the ecosystem. You've got QR codes on your table. We're actually the largest LEI provider in the ecosystem today. We're issuing 1 in 4 globally of all LEIs that are issued across the world. So we've got great traction in how that works. Michael's been very persuasive in asking for our support on the conference, so we've given discount codes. So if you want to start entering into this, if you want to get your LEI now, grab the QR code. You can get a low-price LEI for issuance today. But that's all I want to say there. I'll hand over to Randy to start walking through.
And before Randy kicks off, so there's the LEI we've been talking about, and now what Randy's going to be talking about is the VLEI, this verified LEI, which allows us to have the delegated authority. Now, to be very clear, right now, Randy is the only qualified, verified LEI provider in the world. Provenant, excuse me. No, but Provenant, the company, but Randy, your company. And that will soon change. I mean, we'll have more coming. You know, Simon's committed to becoming a qualified LEI right now, and that model will change. So you're going to share with us how this actually works.
Absolutely. Am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. So we actually had to get our LEI, and we did it through Ubisecure's Rapid LEI, and you should go through the process, take the discount. It's really a fast process. It's very thorough. As a new company, you guys had to actually come back to us and ask us for some additional information. So it made me feel very confident that it was thorough, it was, comprehensive. So anyway,
Thank you.
Good for you, yeah. So I want to talk through, it's maybe a little bit more technical, leaning towards that, in terms of how do we actually put everything we've been talking about with organizational credentials and identity into practice. So let me walk you through a few slides here. So the VLEI itself works like this, where Glyph, as Stefan described, is the root of trust, and they issue a credential to the qualified VLEI issuer, which was Provenant, and Glyph actually signs that credential and issues it to Provenant. As a qualified VLEI issuer, Provenant can then vet and issue a credential to first the legal entity, and the legal entity has keys that they can use to cryptographically sign whatever it is that they're going to be signing. And I'll show you as we go forward. And it's important that you're seeing that there are more than one key up here. And the reason for that is that when we issue that first legal entity credential to the enterprise, if we issue it to one person and something happens to that one person and they're the only one who has a key, you've got big problems there. There could also be governance issues where you need the CEO, the chairman of the board, you need multiple people to give that authorization. So the fact that you can do multi-sig adds a level of security and recoverability to it. And you can create schemes such as you only need 2 out of the 3 keys to sign, okay? So after the legal entity has issued its first VLEI, then we begin issuing to people. So there are several roles called official organizational roles. They include the CEO. And when the CEO, we do a identity assurance process. It's very rigorous. I'll skip through the details here. But the qualified VLEI...
Let me pause right there, though, but it's not painful. I went through it last week and got mine. And in that context, it's also public. So if you go to the Glyph website and look up Identity Praxis, you'll see those public records.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why the qualified VLEI issuer can be the issuer of that credential to the CEO, because that is completely public record, right? It doesn't have PII associated with that. However, the legal entity itself may want to issue internal credentials, for example, to their director of marketing or even an external marketing firm. And you can see that the legal entity itself can issue that credential using their keys to issue that credential directly to any people in their organization. And like Simon was saying, it's a tree structure. It can just keep going down, and it can include external organizations like a call center or marketing center down to, the janitor, whoever. So this is how the chaining of the credentials is made possible with the VLEI. And from the marketing person, you can actually walk back through the chain all the way back to Glyph. So you know the full provenance of who issued it. So let me take another example, telephone numbers, okay? With telephone numbers, they have a similar kind of delegation that happens with them. You have a numbering authority, which in different jurisdictions, in North America, you have the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, but they're issued, they allocate the phone numbers. So they may allocate a set to a CPaaS provider who ultimately allocates a phone number to a brand. And what that looks like here is that the numbering authority as the root of trust might have an entire range, and they're going to delegate 1,000 numbers from that range to a service provider. And then that service provider may assign or delegate the use of a single number to a brand. And so you see, you just move down to a single phone number for the brand. And the scope of authorization decreases as you move through each link in the chain. And that makes sense too, right? You don't want somebody further down in the delegation to have more authority than the CEO, right? So the delegation decreases. Likewise, cryptographically, and I won't go into the details of it, but there's a cryptographic binding from each credential back to the delegating credential above it, okay? So you can see here that the authorized by is it's actually the hash of the credential of the CPaaS provider issuing that number. So that chains all the way back to the numbering authority. So again, if you're looking at a phone number and somebody says, I have the right to use this phone number, and they present a credential to you, you've got cryptographic proof that they have the right to use that number, but you can also walk back through the entire provenance of how did they get it and who issued it to them to make sure that it's coming from a reputable source. So let me walk you through a use case example, 10DLC messaging in the United States. So we've been talking about different kinds of credentials, a lot of talk about the VLEI as a kind of vetting credential, and I just talked you through telephone numbers as a credential. In the US, the campaign registry has to approve text messaging campaigns. Now, in order for them to approve a campaign, there are some prerequisites. They need to make sure that the enterprise has been vetted, and they need to make sure that they have the legitimate right to use the telephone number. So those are all verifiable credentials that can be presented to the campaign registry as a way for them to instantly verify and quicken the onboarding process to onboard a new enterprise for a new campaign. The campaign registry could also issue their own credential approving that campaign. All of those credentials are issued to the organization, and the organization holds those credentials in their own digital wallet. They control it. They can take those credentials wherever they want. They can move them between wallet providers, and they can present those credentials to whoever they want. And they don't need to go ask anyone else to show my credential. So what happens when an enterprise wants to send a text message? Well, normally they call an API for their service provider, and the service provider can make a request from that wallet for a presentation of their credentials. And so those credentials come back signed to the service provider, who can then verify that those credentials are valid. And that's why you have a little check shield, because now they've verified it, okay? Now, the service provider who's going to create the text message can actually take those signed credentials and put them right into what's called the TLV portion of a message. A quick little image here is that if you look at the structure of an SMPP message, the header is sort of like, you know, the engine at the front of the train, and the mandatory fields are kind of like first class, and the optional parameters are kind of like, you know, economy class, and TLVs, think of them as like the cargo area, okay? So there's room in the protocol for you to add some data. So those signed credentials can go right into the TLVs. And in addition to that, the service provider, the CSP, can add their own signature to it. So now you begin to know the entire provenance of it. Now I want to pause just for 1 second, because some people might be looking at this diagram and saying, well, isn't this what happens today with the campaign registry and TLVs? Okay, because right now, there's information that goes into the TLVs, which includes the campaign ID, and it includes, what does it include, Soren?
Other stuff.
In the TLVs, you've got the tagging, you've got the campaign ID, and you've got...
One carrier in the US does a form of TLV tagging, and that is for a message class.
The message class. So the message class is very important because that indicates what kind of throughput is being allowed to that enterprise to send traffic. If they want to send high volume traffic, then they're going to have one message class. If they have another use case where they're only allowed to send at a slower rate, the message class indicates that slower rate, okay? That data, like I'm showing here, goes in the TLVs. But that data is not signed, it's plain text, and theoretically, if you were to lift that material out of one message and put it into another message,
I just want to just add that the TLV tagging is not done by the CSP. With the one carrier, it's done by the carrier themselves. So it's not something that can be lifted and changed and moved.
okay, well, I'm going to get to that, but I actually worked on the early version of the spec for it, so I'm quite familiar with it, and I've worked with SMPP quite a lot, and I can tell you, just given my knowledge, I know exactly which TLVs the tags go into, and if somebody has the knowledge to do it, I mean, we wonder how bad actors do bad things. They know how to do them, and they figure it out. So there's a difference between how things are supposed to work and how things actually work in fact. And that's part of the challenge that we're up against. So let me continue. And
excuse
Soren
me,
is exactly right. This is not happening today, that the service provider at the point of origin is adding information into the message. But wouldn't it be stronger if that information went into the message at origin. Doesn't that make sense? If you've got credentials and you can prove it yourself, why not present them, put them right in at the beginning, don't have anyone else do it for you?
Yeah. Just a,
Well, maybe we can let him finish, and then we'll do questions at the end, because we don't want to disrupt the flow. So why don't you finish up?
Randy, just a point in between. Sorry about my voice. Yes, the concept has a big application in many areas, including SMS, no doubt about it. But there is no need to put anything into the messages. It can be run completely separate from the message flow. So I'll be happy to work with you to, as we've done before, look at how this can be applied. But it's not exactly as it is described. So I think we should take it offline. It just doesn't work like that. It is, the potential is big, we can use it, but it's going to be slightly different. That's my point.
Okay, well, I respectfully disagree, and let me just say that this is an example of a use case. It's a way that this technology can be applied. Now, if you look at voice, which, I think this is probably more of a messaging crowd here, but in voice, what's happening is that there's a SIP invite that goes out as part of the call setup. And that SIP invite contains signed data that gets verified. And so you've got a lot of data traveling through networks that can carry information in them. And I think the point I'm trying to get at, despite what differences we might have, the point I'm trying to get at is that there are new possibilities for how we can strengthen the verifiability and the authenticity, be able to prove the authenticity of a digital communication. So this is by example. If you want to differ with an exact implementation, then,
Yeah, and so just to be clear, this doesn't exist live today. What you're saying is theoretically this is the way we could be doing it to basically stop the bad actor at the very source.
exactly.
Okay, I want to finish the example then.
Okay, so I don't want to be ragging on you guys, but I have a next phase that you'll probably have some comments on. So anyway, the CSP can now send that message on through the network, and it goes through an intermediary transport provider. A lot of messages go through a particular platform. In 2000, I actually was one of the original developers of that platform. I know the limitations of it. I know the strengths. I know not all traffic goes through it, and it doesn't apply to all situations, but it carries a lot of them. In that intermediary platform, when the message comes across, if it contains signed, verifiable data, that platform, it examines TLVs today. So it's not really doing anything different. It's just now there are some TLVs that contain special information that they can verify. So they can pull out those TLVs that have been signed, and they can verify them. And then furthermore, all messages, even today, go to the analytics engine. The analytics engine does content analysis. As Timothy was saying, it's like it opens the container and it looks at what's inside. I don't want to toot my horn, but I actually built the machine learning platform that platform there is using to do the content analytics. So I know how that happens. And I can tell you that analytics platforms would be immensely strengthened if they had the additional verifiable data telling you where it came from. The way it works today, almost universally, is that those analytics platforms are building reputations, okay? They're building a reputation based on a phone number. Now, we know that phone numbers can be used by unauthorized people. We know that organizations can use many different telephone numbers, and they can send traffic across different networks. Same company, traffic going on different networks. But imagine if you could tie the analytics engines, you could attribute that traffic and the phone numbers back to the organization that actually originated it. You're actually able to do effective aggregation to tell you who's the responsible party. And again, going back to what Andrew said in the beginning about remediation or punishment, what you need for this is actually called non-repudiation. You need to be able to prove, and that's the beauty of cryptography, is that it allows you to prove who sent it. With proof, you can punish. You can take remedial actions strongly. Okay, sorry, I got carried away here. So that intermediary platform can verify it, they send it up to the analytics engine, and then they too can countersign it. And if everybody countersigns it, we're moving towards zero trust. Because everybody is signing, everybody is verifying, they're not relying on third parties. So if you get signatures all the way through, and even if you don't, even if just those credentials from the beginning are put in and passed through, you're still going to get complete cryptographic integrity about where did it come from. It's just nice if you get the additional hops too, okay? So going further, it's sent along to a carrier. The carrier pulls out, does their own verification. Again, their analytics now have that additional verifiable information that they can add to their job of doing analytics. Imagine if all these guys could start sharing data from their analytics engines. Imagine how powerful that would be to the industry to be able to really take everybody's point of view and know, who's originating it. Once it goes through there, assuming everything has now been verified, now you get a verified SMS that's delivered to a handset. That's a really nice world. And Timothy mentioned this before. The key here is that we want verifiability to travel with the data, okay? And it comes from the source again. And again, this is just an example how it could be done in messaging, how it could be done in voice, how it could be done for signing corporate filings, whatever it is.
So unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
But I just kind of want to wrap up with this one concept, though, is we've proven that you can save a ton of money on this.
Yep.
We've proven that you can make a lot of money on this. And we've also discussed ad nauseum, there's really an infinite number of use cases for this being one of them. So I think, as was pointed out, let's take it offline. As an industry, let's have this discussion and move this morning forward as we go through that. And then post-lunch, we're going to talk about this on the other side from the personal, individual side of things. So thank you very much. Let's go have lunch.
Thank you.